You're watching our program freely and critically. It is conducted by me, Tomas Kavaliauskas, and Professor Gintautas Mažeikis, Kaunas Vytautas Magnus University. Our guest today is a professor of economics with a specialization in microeconomics and game theory from Hamburg University, Professor Manfred Holler, who is also an expert on Niccolò Machiavelli. And today in our program, actually, we will be talking about Niccolò Machiavelli with a surprisingly interesting approach. So perhaps at first, Professor Gintautas Mažeikis, for our introductory theoretical approach, would like to ask Professor Manfred something.
Yeah, I'm very happy to see you, Manfred, in our broadcasting, and I'm thinking that your topic is very interesting and urgent. It's not only about Machiavelli, as I understood, but first of all, probably about family of Medicis, but to understand probably we need to, first of all, to ask you, why do you study the index of power and how the index of power is related to the studies of oligarchs? So index of power and studies of oligarchs. Why you as an economist, are interested in so strange, I would say, questions?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm happy to be back in Kaunas, but unfortunately only in a digital way. But anyway, it's very nice. Now the questions you raised are very difficult because I did the first publication, I think, on power indices in '78, and it was about the European Parliament. And the idea was they changed the seat distribution in the European Parliament, and well, of course, we expect that was before the first direct election. We expected now things have changed, but when you looked, and the ratios have changed, the proportions. But when you looked in this power measure, which we use the Shapley value, then in fact nothing changed. And that's why we conjectured, my co-author and me, we conjectured that people had a feeling, about power there, and said, well, as long as the power relations do not change, so to say, the probability to have a say in the outcome, we don't mind, how the seat distribution changes. So that was a bit the start. But of course, power, I was always interested. You have power in Adam Smith's, in the Wealth of Nations, you have power, Yeah, but that's a different kind of power. It's mainly about, a bilateral power, not really bargaining, but employers against employees and all this, But I think power is a very important concept in economics. And then you have monopoly power and all this, But
But what about oligarchs and families of them? Why do you pay?
The Medici is a bit a special case. Actually, here we started with the idea of networks. I have published, together with a friend, Florian Rupp, about 5 or 6 papers with networks, And to evaluate the position in a network, we decided we have to look at the power there, And then, being aware of the Medicis and the literature, having read Machiavelli, I thought this is a nice way to look at it, to look at the family networks. And after that, we discovered that other people did it as well. So it's not unique. There are 5 to 10 very nice papers on networks and the Medicis. But this we only discovered after we started,
Do you find some dangers, in studies of family capital, oligarchs' capital studies, as well their power? Ordinary democratic societies don't see them or to ignore them as some kind of absence, and you just do contrary.
Yeah, well, I think we have always had oligarchs, and maybe there's also now a cultural difference, so to say. When we look at Eastern Europe, we talk about oligarchs, but when you look at the German history, we had the groups, and people like that, and of course they were oligarchs. I mean, the emperor came for a coffee break to the groups, and then group said, well, you wouldn't to have this and we do that, So the concept of oligarch was not anyway determining my intention to do this analysis. But of course we talk about oligarchs.
But do you separate aristocracy and oligarchs? You remember that Aristotle divided them. Aristocracy is some kind of positive power, and oligarch networks and oligarchian families some kind of negative. Do you separate them, or you use as a synonyms?
Why, when you look in the history, many aristocrats, they were the result, of murdering some others, taking over the country of somebody else and so. And well, it depends, there's a lot of blood, so to say, and the methods have changed, but aristocracy, it was not always this plain thing, this positive that it just works on, I mean, well, wherever you look, I think every second English king was killed, more or less, There's a very nice story by Terry Jones, who is one of the Monty Python, and he shows us actually the ugly kings were the good ones and the good ones were the bad ones, And when you look at this story, I mean, this is a crime story, detective story.
So in the center of your research is the Medici Bank, could you explain the role of Medici Bank for why do you choose this point, to speak about Medici's Bank?
Well, even Medici Bank is nothing very specific. It started, of course, with financing the Pope, but there was somebody else financing before. I don't remember now the details. And then the Medicis took over, So, and the Pope, of course, was very important there. And then the Medicis themselves became popes,
Mm-hmm. So maybe we could continue with some slides which you prepared. Thomas, could you show?
Yes, I need 1 second to upload them.
But while we're waiting, I would like to ask you to explain a little bit for our audience. It's some geography and the time of popes, beginning of Medici Bank, maybe Machiavelli. Could you say a few introductory words in order to understand this one topic, how it's related with the question of index of power and this oligarchs, networks, and family and business?
Well, to give an answer on that, I have to write a book, actually, because it's a very complicated story. And as you see, I will talk about complexity. And this, when you read, not so specific the Il Principe, the Prince, but the Discorsi, which is, of course, Roman Republic mainly. And then you find out that Machiavelli was actually a Republican. You see, how history, so to say, is, how difficult it is, to give a clear answer. That's why Machiavelli has written this discourse which is based on Livius, you know. I mean, he wanted this as a comment for himself first. And that's, I'm sorry about this question, you know, because this is a very valuable question, but I don't think I have only 1 hour to talk, isn't it? we should maybe focus on this now. It's difficult enough because there is complexity of life, you know, so this is my excuse. Yeah, let me start with this.
Yeah, Professor Mann, if you're ready, I hope you can see the slides. And when you tell me to switch to the next one, I will.
Yeah. So I will start with the first slide, and I want to stress that this is an exercise, you know, and it's an exercise in triolectics. And so far, we don't know really what triolectics is. And after this presentation, there will still be problems. It's a bit like quantum theory, actually. Nobody really knows what it is, or understands it, let's say. And then there's also complexity in Machiavelli. Why Machiavelli? Because I think, you know, what I present here is highly relevant for today's view on politics, maybe for the politics as such. And if that is clear after 45 minutes, you know, this relevance, then I'm happy, you know. So this is the story has, as you see, 2 heroes. The one is Machiavelli. I don't talk too much about Machiavelli as a person. You know him probably much better than I do. And the second is Ascorion, and this is maybe a strange candidate here, but because Ascorion is probably the most popular, the most famous Danish painter. There's Kirkeby, of course, and Hammershøi and so. But Ascorion he is in almost all bigger galleries, museums, and so he's an important artist, but he has written a lot in philosophy, and he has developed a system which is called triolectics. You will see on one of the slides, I don't comment the slides all, but you will see that triolectics is based on the idea which is dialectics. In dialectics you have thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and Ascorion says, no, this is not how life is. Sometimes in situations of conflict you have this dialectic prayer works, but in general there are processes, there are no equilibria, there are interactions. We have to look at the dynamics of the whole story, and for that he coined, I would say, the term triolectics. Triolectics was there long before there, and probably starts in the Bible, but I will give an example where Machiavelli is, so to say, discussing in terms of triolectics, and then also where we see how it gets rearranged into dialectics to describe conflicts. So this is the first hero, Machiavelli. You don't see the dates down there. You see the portrait was made after Machiavelli was dead. You know, the painter was not yet grown up when Machiavelli died in 1527. You know, so again, could be a problem. Can I have the next slide? Yeah, this is Ascorion. Here you see him as a painter. You know, this kind of painting is
very famous international situationist and activist.
Yeah, and what is about? He died in 1973 and was born, I think, in 1914. It should be written there some. Well, it's written here, you know. So, okay. So he's almost contemporary, at least to me. You know, I was still alive. I was alive when he was still alive, and so. And yeah, he has changed the art world, at least in Denmark. And He was one of the first doing dripping. He was one of the first doing this kind of brushing and all kind of things. But of course, he was a European, so he didn't get as famous as Jackson Pollock and Otherwell. And well, he's painting like de Kooning, actually, but that's just my impression. Maybe we should have the next slide. Yeah, this is one of his icons, so to say, the duck, the uneasy or le canard inquiétant, and this is, well, become a cult painting. You know, it's not probably not, you know, it's definitely not at his best, you know, but maybe the most challenging one. So, and here, I don't know if there's something here. Maybe it's.
Yeah, this picture is very, very famous about the duck. You know, that's very good and very good and very interesting. You know, that's. I just continue, Manfred, a little bit talk about because you disappeared for a moment about Asger Jorn and this picture, which was one of the icon of international situationists who fight it against the society of the spectacle, and this one picture became as an icon. But it's very interesting that you related it to triolectics. Nice, please explain it.
Thank you very much. So then we come, well, starting it with this, and he defined this kind of art. He said, well, I'm no longer interested in this kind of simple thing, you know, that you try to explain something, you look at processes, you look at the dynamics of painting. You're not so much interested in the result, but how you do it and what can come out and so on. So now I think we are with triolectics, and the most popular example of triolectics you see in the next slide. This is the football, and this football story is already.
Should I switch to the next slide?
Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, this is an illustration which already Asger Jorn gave, this football field, you know. This has, think about, you know, the regular football is dialectic. You have two teams, and they look for winning, and they fight each other and so. But how's about if we have three teams playing the same time on the field with three goals, and yeah, how does it develop? And this is a picture of an experiment which was in fact done in Kirschau, and this Kirschau is on the Polish-Czech-German border. It's in Germany, but it's in this border triangle, and there were three teams from Czech Republic, from Poland, and from Germany, and they were playing each other, but they were amateurs, you know, at least in the beginning. And then you have, of course, problems, you know, to solve. I mean, what does it mean winning there, you know? How do you count? What is if somebody shoot the ball out of the field? Who is bringing it back, you know? In two teams, it's no problem, but in three teams, all these problems emerge, you know. And he says this is an example of triolectics, because this is what we have, you know. If we expand the action space from the bilateral conflict situation in a wider situation, you know, then we have all kind of problems. Now,
yes. It's very similar. Yeah, sorry. It's very similar to the problem of three bodies problem, you know, when you could predict two bodies relationships and becomes unpredictable if we see three bodies. And the triolectics probably is less predictable or even unpredictable.
Actually, prediction is not what you should look at in triolectics. You should see, you know, the process, the dynamics, but a prediction presupposes a result, an equilibrium or something like that, you know. And Asger Jorn said, well, we are not interested in this kind of equilibrium, because we are in a world, which is more complex than the dialectic one. And there is no synthesis, so you don't have to wait for it, No, but just as an example for how in triolectics, so to say, rules or impacts, develop, not results, but the dynamics. In Kirchhoff, they said, well, if you make a goal to one of the other two teams, then it's positive for you, it counts 1 point, but for the two other teams, they get negative, irrespective who, so to say, received the goal, who was, so to say, in disadvantaged situation. So you have 1 point, if A, so to say, makes a goal in the B team, you make 1 point for A, minus for B, a minus for C. And that gives a kind of very wild dynamics in a way, because you rush, you try, to make this work. On the other hand, Yuan discussed a completely different solution, a different mechanism. He said, well, we crown the one that concedes the fewest goals. You don't look at making goals, you just look how many goals you suffered from. And then, of course, the dynamics changes completely. So it's an example, where the rules, that describe the possible processes changes the dynamics of the game here. And this is actually what we expect in the trialectic arena, that little things might change tremendously what we can see. Again, this even on the new rules, so to say, there are no equilibria. We just look, we try to find the equilibria in kind of game theoretical terms, but they are not valid, because if you find some, you find many, and then you still don't know what to forecast and so, so it's just a game. Okay, so this is this triolectic story, and then I looked in Machiavelli and said, well, I remembered that he was discussing is it advantageous if you are a country, an oligarch or an aristocrat, a prince, to make an alliance with a stronger prince or with a weaker? Is it advantageous just at all to make alliances, or should you be neutral? And that leads us to he looked at a historical case, and it was, when the Romans came to Greece, and there was a conflict, and this conflict we can see now when you show me the map, which is probably the next slide or the second slide from now. Yeah. Next one, please. Yeah, this is the map. I don't know whether you can see it, but this is the case which is described by Machiavelli. And it's very much like this kind of soccer game where you have 3 teams. Because there were in the beginning, on the left side, this green, there are the Romans, which came from Italy over to Greece. Then you have Macedonia, the big spot there still. But this is the time after Alexander the Great, and then you have, on the right side, you have something which is the kingdom of the Seleukide. This is Antiochus. I pronounce it in German because this German is closer to the Old Greek than English, I must say. Antiochus III, he was king of this kingdom there, but the kingdom included Persia, it included Syria, and what is today Iraq and all this, so it was an immense kingdom. And there was this conflict because the Aetolian League, which is here, I don't know whether you can see it, I have difficulties to see it there. They wanted to block the Romans to come in. And for that, they wanted to have the Achaean League, which is down in the Peloponnese in the north, and over to, actually Delphi was there, over there. Corinth and so, they, what is this now? Here, yeah. They, well, let me see. They wanted, yeah, to support the Romans, or at least it was not clear. And then the Aetolians said to the Achaeans, please stay neutral, you know, you better stay neutral, because now Antiochus III, he will come over and beat the Romans. Yeah, but the Achaeans had, well, there was a discussion, and the Roman delegates said, well, if you stay neutral, you know, you will pay the price of the winner, no matter who is the winner, you know. If you stay neutral in this conflict, dialectic situation, starting with a triolectic situation, if you stay neutral and we come into this conflict, and then in the end, you know, you will be the victim of the winner, you know. So you better don't stay neutral. And the Romans, of course, they wanted the support of the Achaeans, you know, and this is actually what they got. Now the final battle, you know, for Antiochus III was over here now in Asia Minor, and Antiochus III was defeated heavily. Mysia, I think, was the location. Yeah, and yeah, and the Romans came over, you know, took over Greece and Asia Minor part. Actually, there was then the kingdom of Pergamon was enlarged. But that's not the problem or the issue I wanted to point out. The issue I wanted to point out is the interrelationship between a triolectic or triolectic world and then boiling it down, so to say, to a dialectic one, enemy or world, you know, that this should be profitable. Machiavelli supported this, you know, but then he raised a lot of other questions with it, and actually there are no answers. He says, oh, it all depends, you know, and that means, you know, even if you come into a dialectic world conflict, there are still many answers because the world is not dialectic. That's it. Okay, now I've advanced already quite a bit, but maybe you have some questions on the historical side of it.
No, I think that this introduction about dialectics and the historical case, which was interesting for Machiavelli, you presented quite good. It shows how complex it's dialectics when we start to consider power relationships, you know, and Machiavelli is not so simple like, you know, one-dimensional or dialectical, but dialectics immediately makes very complicated relationships between powers, families, you know, and so on. It's clear. We could continue.
Yeah, well, thank you. No, that's a nice comment, you know. So now I do something very simple based on my some work in game theory and so, and also I stay with soccer now, and I start actually to look at the kind of literature thing. I want to present you Peter Handke's, well, in English it's called The Goalie's Anxiety at the Penalty Kick. In German, and the original is German, is Die Angst des Torwarts vom Elfmeter, which is much more elegant. And Peter Handke is, of course, a poet. You know, he's a Nobel Prize winner in literature. I think 3 or 4 years ago he got the
Shall
Nobel
I go
Prize.
to the next slide?
And,
Should I go to the next slide?
Yeah. Many other slides. Another, please.
Another, please.
Yeah, here we are. Okay, so simple models about dialectic instability. You know, this is the essence of it. And I'm talking now about
Oh, sorry.
Peter. No, thank you.
Oh, no.
This is too early. No. This is it. Yeah, thank you. So because he discusses in this novel, you know, the problem of a goalie, when, well, actually it's not true. It's in the movie which is based on this novel. In the novel, he doesn't discuss this. We expected he will discuss it, but he's an artist. He doesn't do it, you know. So, okay. But if we try to satisfy this expectation, then we think about how is the interaction between the kicker and the goalie, you know, in a football game, you know. And you find out, you know, and this situation is also, yeah, in the tradition of Ascoyon, you know, you find out, you know, it's not easy, this interaction. It's dialectic and, you know, from the start, but it's not that you can say this will be the result. And why? Because the equilibrium you find out is that the goalie should go 1/3 to the left, 1/3 to the middle, 1/3 to the right, and the kicker should shoot to the left 1/3 times, 1/3 times to the middle, and so on. But they only do it once. They don't make statistical series, you know, with infinite time horizon. They only do it once. And the second is the equilibrium is what we call mixed. It says, well, you should, if you're a goalie, you should, jump with a probability 1/3 to the left, 1/3 to the middle, and 1/3 to the right. But how will you do that? You know, I mean, how will you actually do that? And that's the question which was always, well, which was sometimes raised by Ascoyon. We have to look at it, what happens, not, you know, so to say, what is in this calculation. And here is a case where the calculation doesn't help you. You know? And in fact, if you could do anything in this game. That means, you know, all this reasoning which you find here in this matrix, you know, and where you get 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 as a equilibrium strategy doesn't help you to conclude. What from outside you could expect, you know, that there is a probability of 1/3 that the reaction of the goalie to the shot of the kicker is good from outside. But it doesn't help the goalie because he doesn't know whether, to go left, to right, or in the middle, you know, to catch the goal. So
Manfred, may I ask you, does it mean that equilibrium in this triolectic system is impossible, just only dynamics?
The equilibrium is not impossible, but it's just a calculation. It does not help you to forecast anything. It does not help you to do a good decision. No, it's just a kind of, afterwards you could say, as a justification where the probability was 1/3, and I randomized, you know. But the coach might say,
yeah. Does it mean that ordinary, when we read the Prince of Machiavelli, we think that we would like to find some method and final method of power, you know, but if Machiavelli follows triolectics, he couldn't present final method of power. Just to show how to orient yourself, the cases of triolectics. I am right?
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And it's important because some people think that the prince is a cooking book, you know, for how a prince would behave, you know. But in many cases, Machiavelli says, well, this is a proposed way to do it, but look at it carefully, and then you don't know what to do. Yeah. But of course there are tricks, you know, how to have power and so.
Yeah, I like your metaphor that Machiavelli, the prince, is not cooking book. Yeah, you're right.
It's not. Okay, we look at the next game. So, but keep it there, you know. What is important actually is that you don't need 3 agents to have triolectic. It's sufficient, you know, that you have 2 and you have this kind of complexity. Ascoyon very often tries, when he points out 2 important agents, he very often tries to introduce a 3rd one. he has the idea that this tri has to do with 3, you know, but then he himself, you know, forgets about the third one for a while. So it's not, the triolectic doesn't say there have to be 3. There's well, we have, of course, we have triads, we have triumvirates and all that, you know. But even if you look at the triumvirates of Caesar and later the second one with Augustus, the third one was not really playing. Who knows about Lepidus or so? Nobody, you know. We know Antonius and we know Octavian, you know, but Lepidus. Okay. So
Should we go to the next slide?
Yeah. Yeah, this is just story. At least the next one, yeah. Now we come to another case, you know, where actually, which is triolectic, because, well, there are 3 strategies, so to say, 3 possibilities, just like before, you know. But then in this case, you know, sometimes it boils down to a dialectic case, and this is not very favorable. I'm discussing here this game, probably you all know, it's called, well, it depends, scissors, rock, paper, or paper, rock, scissors, and so on. And the story is, you know, that 2 people play this game simultaneously, and if the one has a scissor like here, you know, and the other one has a rock, then the one with the rock wins because the rock is kind of infringing the quality of the scissors and cutting the scissor, or at least the scissor does not cut the rock, you know. Then there's paper. Paper will wrap the rock, but paper can be cut by the scissors. So what you get is a kind of circle, you know, and we see this in the next matrix here. Please, the next slide. Yeah, here you see this kind of circling, you know. I mean, of course, when you have rock, that means there is no result, you know. But rock, scissors means, you know, that scissors, that, what is this here? This is strange. Scissors is beating, scissors, yeah. Forget about these numbers, I better say, because I think this is rock, paper. That looks good. Yeah? No, that doesn't look.
We trust everything you show us because we lack competence to question this.
I think I just repeated the matrix of before, you know, or my computer did it. The computer did. But you know, this gives a circle. You know, when the 2 play, you know, whatever you do, you know, there's one is defeating you and the other one you defeat, you know, so you get this kind of circle. And but the story really is, and that's why it's not so important, if you do it sequentially instead of simultaneous. Just imagine, you know, I am very, yeah, here we said clever Mary is very charming. He says, sweet Paul, you know, I invite you to do the first move. You can choose whatever you want, you know, rock, scissors, paper. And that looks very generous, and there are cases of this generosity. But in this case, you know, if, of course, sweet Paul chooses rock, you know, then clever Mary will choose paper, you know, and then she wins, of course, you know, because paper will wrap the rock. Whatever sweet Paul proposes as a first move, you know, there's always a best reply in this dialectic context now of clever Mary. So changing from the triolectics simultaneous game into a sequential game, what we call, it makes it dialectic, and then we have a clear proposition what will come out, you know, depending on what sweet Paul will choose. Sweet Paul, although he will, so to say, the loser determines the outcome because there is a best reply by Mary. So the situation changes completely, whether you do it simultaneous or whether you do it sequential. This is the message. And this is actually in Ascoyon. Das ist in Gedanken eines Künstlers. He discusses, that simple rules of how you act in art environment can have tremendous effects. Well, we know that, but here you have this example. You just go from simultaneous choices to sequential choices, and you have, in sequential choices, you have a second move advantage, and then you get this result. This I wanted to show you with that. And then become, to the last example of these trivial ones. And then in this last example, we have.
Should we go to the next slide?
Yeah, the next slide, please. Next two, actually, this after that.
Maybe I can read this one. But this clever Mary who invites Squid Paul to choose his alternative first, and then she will choose hers, scissors and rock, second mover advantage. No matter what Sweet Paul chooses, clever Mary always has a winning alternative. Such a game will not become popular.
Yeah, it will not become popular. Only if you, so to say, don't follow the logic, And of course you can say, I want to be the first. I want to be the first. But in this case, if you're the first, you lose. So here we have now extended the situation to 3 agents, finally, And this is the famous Condorcet cycle, which will be the result here. Those who do social choice, they would have started to yawn and said, I've seen this already 1,000 times and so. But insofar it's interesting because here you see, how the process matters. What is the start and what is the end of the process? So the situation is the following. We have 3, voters or agents or whatever, and they can choose between the world should be red, the world should be blue, or the world should be green. But this A, we call him Alf, he has a preference order on that. He prefers red to blue and blue to green. Then we have Ben, prefers green to red and red to blue. And then we have Claude, and he prefers blue to green and green to red. So we have this kind of preference scheme. And now let's assume in this society, we get the color if there's a majority for it. And what color do we get? Any pair of agents can propose a color, but then there's an alternative pair which can propose another color and win by that. Let's say A and B, they introduced red. A and B, this is the alliance, the coalition. A, B, they have 2 votes, that's the majority. They introduce red. Why not? It's the best for A, and for B it's not so bad. But then BC, Ben can be bribed. C can say, well, let's have green, That's your first alternative, the first ranking alternative instead of red. So let's form a coalition out of B and Claude, Ben and Claude, and then we get green here. And that looks fine. But then there is A coming around and say, well, you can have. Is there A coming around? I hope so. you can have blue, Claude, if you form a coalition with me. Alpha is blue. Here is the second one. It's better than green. And blue here as the first one is better than green. So AC here, this AC, will form a coalition and we have blue. Having blue, then a coalition of A and B can implement red, and so on. You know, we get this circle. And down there, or is it in the next? I have to tell you that I cannot see the bottom of this pages. There's a. So,
if I change the.
Maybe we go to the next slide. Let's say, hopefully it's,
okay.
no, it's not the next slide. What we have down here, I think is no. I think it's my computer who has the problem, you know.
Ah.
I cannot see the bottom line. So in that case, you know, the bottom line might be very important.
Can you see it now?
No, sorry. Because the bottom line should show a process.
A process. A process is.
Yeah, here. That's the right slide, you know. But it should be a process, you know.
Yeah, we see a process.
AB, and then you go to BC.
Yeah, A1B go to B1C, go to A1C, go to A1B.
And further on. You
and
see
further.
There's a cycle.
Yeah, we see.
And this is exactly what I cannot see. Yeah? So there you see the cycle. And that brings me back, actually, to Ascoion. Says, in this situation, the situations which have a triolectic profile, we should look at the dynamics. We should look at processes. There is no end, there is no outcome, there is no event, and so the process is interesting. And it's interesting, in fact, it's very interesting to have this, to see that there are cycles. Because this model, you know, the Condorcet cycle model, is used in the theory of social choice as a core model, showing that you cannot always have a winner when you have a simple majority rule. Or if you have a winner, it only depends when you stop the process. If you say you have only two steps, you know, for the process, then you get an end, you cut it off. So stories like that are discussed with this very simple model, which goes back to Marquis de Condorcet, and he was in the French Revolution, and that was before the French Revolution.
Manfred, because we are going to the final part, I have one question about this one picture of you with the process, you know, the final, this formula of process. And my question is, you know, about the history of Italy, especially in the period from early Renaissance to Risorgimento somewhere in 19th, 20th century, of becoming Italy as a state, you know, because we all time saw the process, the only process, because the question is, what was the condition of unification of Italy as a state, you know, because if we are looking only into internal or immanent potence of Italy divided into multiplicity of states, we don't see any possibility for their unification. And in order to be unified, they need some outside power or intervention or some kind of, you know, imperial power, other imperial power, because that trialectical process inside of Italy couldn't stop, never. Do you see this one conclusion or different?
Yeah, no, first of all, I want to mention that, of course, you have a parallel process in Germany at that time. You know? In Italy, you had Cavour, so to say, as hero, finding the the key, to the unification.
Yeah.
And in Germany you had Bismarck, So it's a very similar process, from that point of view. Now in Italy, I would say one condition was that Spain became weaker. So the support for southern Italy, there was this kingdom of Naples, was a bit lost, Of course, the unification started in the north, with Piedmont, Sabauda, Sardinia, and so as a core. But the real unification, so to say, that the south and the north go together, this was due to the fact actually, not that there was not the external support. I mean, there was Garibaldi, but it was that the superpower there,
Yeah. Even Garibaldi lost. We remember that even Garibaldi lost his, fights for the unification. Even his project was not successful because multiplicity of external powers who would like to participate in the game.
Yeah, of course, and that and Garibaldi, I think, was originally from Nice, wasn't he? And that was Nizza.
Yeah.
Nice became French, and he ended up in the French Parliament. So it's a very strange result from that. Yeah, but you look at the process, and the process is very interesting, I would say.
Yeah, and I would say for our audience that you show that parallels between these triolectics and, for example, family relationships and business relationships. They work in a very similar way. From the other side, it explains for us long periods and long processes which we need to understand. It's I think it's very helpful, your method.
Thank you. But to come back to the problem, I think because it was not dialectic in Italy, it was not dialectic. It took so long time, the unification. No, I mean, already in Principe, the last chapter, which is a very special one, Machiavelli made clear that he wants to have this unification, and there has to be a prince to take over the power. His hero was Cesare Borgia, but he was already dead at that moment, So they were looking for Giovanni de Bandinero, I think was the person who should be the hero to unify Italy, but that didn't work. I mean, there was not this power concentration. It was a process going on, and a very wild one, when you think about it. There were these Austrians in the north and the Pope in the middle and the Spanish more or less in the south, but they all had special little interests, And it took another 300 years, And a bit similar to Germany. We had a war, between Austria and the Allies against Prussia. That was kind of making this triolectic world, of Germany, a dialectic problem. It was in 1866. It was not a civil war. It was a real war, so to say, between these powers. And the result was that Austria was declared no longer as part of Germany. So that's this is, I think this is a nice example, how triolectic problems exist, and there's a kind of large interaction, and then bigger changes, it goes back to dialectics. And this brings us back to the example of Machiavelli, with this the Romans taking over, Greece and Asia Minor, and so it didn't take care so much about the small leagues like the Achaean leagues or the Aetolian leagues and so on.
Would you see triolectics between NATO, Russia, and Ukraine?
That's one of the final words. Please show us another slide down. The football field again,
I see.
Because if you continue, because this is to make clear this Russia, China, and America, actually, you know, US, you know, this is, no, okay. No, I think this is what we should think about it, you know. It's so to the point today, you know, the dilemma in the world, you know, we cannot really, well, maybe we don't want to say how the result will be, you know, of these kind of positions we have now. But, and we don't want, you know, that the triolectics, this kind of very complex world with 2, 3 superpowers, and maybe Europe's like comes in too, you know, that this boils down then to a conflict world where we have dialectic again. But that we have seen the danger is there in these little models, you know, trivial models, very trivial models. But there's, you change a little bit the rules, you know, and out from scissors and rock triolectic, you come to a dialectic sequential structure. So it's it's really to think about that, you know.
Thank you very much for extraordinary creative approach to Machiavelli's story and to geopolitical situation. So, dear our viewers, you watched our program Freely and Critically, conducted by me, Tomas Kavaliauskas, and Professor Gintautas Mažeikis from Social and Political Critique Center, Vytautas Magnus University, Kaunas. And today you had the privilege to hear Professor Manfred Holler, who is affiliated with Hamburg University, but he talked to us from Munich. So, danke schön.
Danke schön, danke schön, thank you.